Hey guys, this is Collin Moshman for CardRunners. Now you might say that Sip and Chris recently did an excellent quickie on Sit and Go Wizard, and we're not actually going to be focusing on Wizard. Instead, we're just using Wizard to create the situation that we're going to discuss and do manually. And the reason to solve hands like this manually is that when you start doing that a few times, you get a much better idea for the variables that go into the decision, and I guarantee you're going to start making better in-game decisions. So the situation that we're going to consider is one that's really common in Sit and Go's, where we have, a 6 or 7 blind stack, we get a junk hand in the small blind, we start to ask ourselves, can we shove this? Is it profitable? And you never want to pull the trigger, but then you feel like a nit if you don't. So we're going to look at the math behind this decision. Now to do it manually, we're going to have to do an expected value calculation, bust out the Chillin 411 ICM calculator. So let's get right to that and see the best and easiest way to do this by hand. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write out our general equation. So we need to calculate, if we shove, our expected equity, and then we're going to compare that to the expected equity if we fold, which is going to be not really an EV calculation, but just something we can calculate explicitly. So our expected equity of shoving is always going to be in the same format, which is the probability times the reward of every outcome. So in this case, it's the probability that we get called times our equity in the case that we do get called, which we obviously hope not to be, and then the guy could fold, which would be awesome, and we have some expected equity when he folds. Now, in the meanwhile, like I've said, it's very easy to calculate our equity if we fold. So our equity if we fold is we're going to know every stack, and we just use an ICM calculator to determine what our equity is going to be in that case. So we see that if we fold, all of these stacks are going to be the same. We have our 1300 stack after forfeiting our small blind, and this guy is going to inherit the difference, and so we have an equity, this is showing up right, and we get an equity of around 10.38% when we fold. So we pull that, and we just say that our equity when we fold is 10.38% about. And now all we have to do is calculate our expected equity of shoving, and we get to compare that to the equity of folding, and we have our answer. So a few of these variables are going to be really easy to plug in. Anytime you're dealing with an equation like this, start with what's easiest, and then whatever's left, you'll figure out. So how do we figure out the probability that he calls? Well, to do that, we're going to want to figure out the range of hands that he calls with, and that's going to be an assumption we've got to make. So let's assume that this guy is kind of a standard, fairly passive player, but not somebody we can just totally walk over. So in that case, we're just going to have to get our hands dirty and put in what we think is a reasonable range. Okay, so let's say that this guy is maybe folding his very bottom pairs, but otherwise he knows he's got a call, and any suited ace is going to be good for him. But not all offsuit aces, so if he has a bottom offsuit ace, he's going to fold those. And then when it comes to Broadway hands, any suited Broadway hands besides, well, any of them, and most offsuit Broadway hands, but he's going to fold a couple of the offsuit Broadway hands, and so we get that he's calling us with about 22% of hands. Now, that's a very interesting thing to figure out, because once we've done that, we know how wide he's calling us.